And we're live. We don't have anybody watching just yet.
Okay, that's fine.
So let's get rid of that. And here we go. It's so nice to see you.
Good to see you. I could, hold on a minute. Let me just do this then. Ages. If I just put it on. Okay, so thank you, everybody. And it's really, really great to see you. And, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. The last 10 days. And
who would have thought? Who would have thought your post would go viral?
Oh, I know. I mean, it's honestly Thursday night, bank holiday week. Everybody's away. Everybody's at the beach. I mean, that's the don't post on LinkedIn kind of story, isn't it? All of the, so it's amazing. So, but anyway, it's been a whirlwind, and there we go. Perfect storm, as I've called it. So, what I wanted to do, I spoke to Denise. We worked together quite closely, and when I saw that slide or that visual, the career stage visual, what I wanted to do is Denise and I just wanted to talk about kind of career stages for the modern day rather than from 1957. And so really that's what this talk is about. So, so first of all, I want to introduce Denise, and she, I work in the career and talent strategy area. So I've known about Denise for a long, long time. She's been on my radar for a long time. She's written 6 books. One of them is How to Get Hired at 50 Plus. So that's kind of my Bible when I'm working with clients on my Diamond program. She's got a doctorate in her 60s. So she's one of my role models. Not that I'm ever going to get a doctorate in my 60s, but in terms of career, and she's been working in this space for a long, long time, and academically she knows everything there is to know, and she's had lots and lots of clients as well. So we just wanted to sort of come together and talk about the truth about career stages, which isn't really about age. It's about age, and it's about life stage, and it's about big events.
Yeah.
Have I forgotten anything, Denise? What have I forgotten?
Well, they can always look us up on LinkedIn or elsewhere, can't they? I mean, exactly. This is a conversation, and I'll never forget when my Rethinking Retirement for Positive Aging launched, and we did this, and neither of us had ever used StreamYard before, and it was like, let's just play around with the tech. And we haven't played about with it since. We really ought to. But let me introduce you to my great friend and colleague, Sarah Taylor Phillips. And she'd been trying to get hold of me, and she made a phone call on the one time I actually picked up my phone. I'd arrived at a new gym, and I was 10 minutes early because I didn't know where it was. And while I was waiting, Sarah phoned me up and we arranged to meet. And, we've just got so much synergy going on. But what I love about Sarah is all this knowledge in the past about how she was a real game changer in the whole sort of marketing area with bringing temporary professionals into organizations. And how she is now. I don't think I know anybody who networks more than Sarah. She seems to know everybody. People know Sarah. And when I say about, Sarah, it's like, it's nice to know. And she does things about recruitment strategy and talent acquisition. And she has this program, Be Inspired and Get Hired. And she's really helping people of an older age group, younger as well, I guess, who wants to get a job. And I've just noticed that people are making comments. There's nothing I think I actually need to share with you at this time. We don't have a junior tech person here, so I'm trying to keep an eye on that. But we're so glad that everybody listening in is here listening in. And we just intend this to be valuable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Yeah, so shall we talk about sort of how it all got started then, or the
Please.
post and
Yeah,
the
of
perfect
course.
storm? So I think, yeah, so it did. So this has come about, hasn't it, with kind of the coverage on LinkedIn
Mm,
and everywhere else, about the post that I put up. And I've written about it actually, a newsletter yesterday, but it kind of was the perfect storm, really. So a number of things happened. I run a job search community for 300, well, over 350 people, and we have fun looking for roles. We keep each other company. We reduce job search fatigue and overwhelm. And so I know how people feel. I've got clients as well. I know how people feel when they kind of don't land the role. So, and I decided to go and do a recce at my local job centre because I just imagined, I don't know, in my head that it would be like it was back in the day. I thought they'd go there and then there'll be jobs posted on the board. Like there still are jobs. If you go to a job fair, local job fair, and I recommend doing that, there still are
yeah.
jobs posted on the board. So I just assumed that there would be some. Went to my local job centre and they said, no, sorry, there aren't any jobs here. You need to apply through Indeed. So that was one thing. And because of the work I do, I know that Indeed, or these online job boards, basically, if you're over 50, then you have, your chances of landing a role if you're over 50 on an online job board versus if you're 30, say, it's 10 times lower. So that's pretty big. That's a pretty big
Mm,
number. So that happened, those two things happened. The other thing that I was doing is I was putting together a presentation for a group of professional services leaders in Bristol. Actually, I did a talk and there was around 60 of them, and I talk about career ages and stages and
mm,
big events happening. That shifts career priorities, basically. And so I thought I'd do some research on the internet on career stages. And then that visual came up. It came up. And I was absolutely shocked. I couldn't believe it. Now, I've said in my post, I'm rising 60. So at the end of the year, I'm 60. And I sit bang in that career decline category because the slide basically says from age 45 to 55, you're in late career. And from age 55 to 65, you're in career decline. And in my case, and in so many of my clients' cases, and in so many employees' cases and leaders' cases, that's just not the case at all. So I was incensed, and yes, and so I posted, and I went round to a friend's house, I think, and she persuaded me, encouraged me to post the visual. I did, and it
mm,
went from there, really. So there, but it was a number of factors. It wasn't just the visual. It's kind of my background, going to the job centre, being told to work with
mm.
that job board, and Indeed is the largest job board in the world. I mean, it's a tech company, it's an IT company, but their business, so that's their business, being a tech company, but they are careers and jobs. They should know better, really. So yeah, so it all kind of started there. So it was really the perfect storm. It was all of those things happening at one time.
Yeah. And what I think that's a really good example of is why we need to have people from across the generations. Because if one of the people in marketing had shown us that image, me or you, and probably everybody listening here would have said that you can't say that. And when I first saw it, well, first of all, you're posting it on my birthday when I'm on the way to Chelmsford because I'm going up to a gig, so I'm not really
That wasn't me.
working that day. And I was like, well, who is it? And then I remembered, because obviously as part of being an occupational psychologist, I learn a lot about career theory.
Mm.
And then it was like, who was Donald Super? And Donald Super, I think, was born in 1910. So obviously that's the sort of knowledge that it's probably 35 or 40 years ago when I did my, goodness gracious, when I did my master's degree in occupational psychology. But I just actually, if I can just sort of get the tech right and show this slide, there we go.
Yeah.
Hey, this is stuff. Because not only did they use the data, but they used it incorrectly. And I just want to just sort of let other people know about Donald Super's work. Because first of all, he has 5 stages and his decline doesn't start till 65 plus. Because if you think about the 1970s, I can easily think about the 1970s. That was in my first
Me
job.
too.
And so people that were retiring in 1970s were definitely, almost everybody was retiring in their 60s,
Mm.
because many people had hard physical jobs and they were ready for retirement. They're just getting a bit worn out about something. So this is Super's model. And then somehow somehow indeed decided to change it. They probably, well, first of all, they got rid of the early stages and they put it into 10-year categories, not 20-year categories. But decline, I think how Super defines it is yes, it's how I am at the moment. Is like, I don't actually think of myself in decline, but I do see myself as a change of work emphasis. So I have a lot more things that are non-paid that I do now, and it's much more about doing things that are valuable and interesting to me rather than climbing the career ladder, which certainly back 20, 30 years ago was the key thing for me. So I'm going to get rid of that slide for now. But I just wanted to let people know that it's not, don't go and blame Super, blame, them for misinterpreting some theory. And yeah, so that's a bit of my hobby horse about things, because theory underpins, I'm evidence-based and it underpins the work I do. And I think a lot of people who are also career coaches, they've come across it. I think we need to understand it was relevant at the time, relevant earlier. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you looked at decline, meaning, I don't know, more flex or less time, then you know what, maybe that could be because maybe you want a more flexible career kind of later on or earlier on. So, but yes, I think it's really important. But I think it was so interesting for me because, again, this whole massive collaborative and massive collective response, that's when we kind of, well, you knew it, but you were, it was your birthday that day. So do you know what I mean? It kind of, that information was uncovered kind of during the whole, the whole furore. And
I'm just interrupting to say, I think we're getting a few comments that are really just worth putting up. So I'm just like playing about with the text while we're there, and I'm interrupting you. I'm so sorry.
And I've got my dog in the room. Right. Sorry about that. So okay. You go. Sorry about my dog. She just come flying in. So, I don't know how that happened.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier was about, are we boomers or are you Generation X? And 59 3/4, it's like, where do you fit? And you said to me, so you're definitely a boomer, Denise. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm Generation Jones. And you go like, what's this one? I didn't know about this one. So this is again about how they're interpreting things. Because if you think about boomers is like 1946 to 1964, that's 20 years. And I have born in 57, and somebody born in 1964 has not a lot in common with somebody who could be their mum or whatever.
Well, my mum is a baby boomer, and I was born the last 3 days of Generation X. If it says it's 64, because sometimes it says it's 65. So I'm moving. Yeah. I'm definitely a Generation X. Okay, I'm moving that timeline. So let's talk about it being from 65, because 64. Sorry, because then I fit into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but these are just labels. These are just labels, and I think what we're getting now, as we're getting older, as society is changing, it's less about, you're at this age, so you must be, because it's more about the stage of life. Because I know people, as I keep on saying, I'm 67. I know a good number of people, and they are ready to sort of like sink into taking life easy. And there's other people who are still climbing mountains. So you can't categorize people.
No, absolutely. I think age is, I think your priorities do shift with age. So I just think about 20s and status or cars is money. When we met up, I don't know, with colleagues or the college lot, that's what we're talking about in our 20s. In our 30s we'll be talking about career development. In our 40s other subjects. In our 50s it's more, glad you're here, and legacy. So it's the conversations have changed. So I think the decade you're in does make a difference, but I think life stage is that's the real kind of game changer on all of this. So lifestyle wise, so some people might downsize their career at certain life stages. They might upsize their career. And I think big events is the other thing as well. So the pandemic was a big event, and that shifted. We saw it. Everybody retired, or lots of people retired. It shifted people's career priorities. And I think if somebody gets ill, or if you get ill, it shifts everything. So it's not just about age. It's about age, and it's about life stage, and it's about big events, and it's about me as an individual. I'm different it's all about sort of my individualness and my unique age and life stage and the big events that have happened to me and what I want to do going forward.
And I think I put in one of my books about when you've met one 60-year-old, you've met one 60-year-old. Because you can't, and I love it, you just can't group everybody together because we are very different. We are very different. But, you know, we're here really to think about things that have come out of your research. And one of the things that I know that you found out about is about how you challenge the way that employers are thinking that we're old and past it. I mean, we are not, and neither is the people that are listening in now. So what is it that you're doing with companies to challenge the way they are?
I don't know. I think that what happens is, I don't know, there's this sweet spot. I think it's, so jobs, for example, there's a sweet spot to be in a job, and it's kind of age 30-ish. So when you're age 30, when I was an FMCG marketer and I was age 30, I fitted into an FMCG marketing box, easy peasy. The computer said yes. When I applied for jobs, everybody would give me one, and it's great. It's a great, you know, time to be. I think what happens as we age, we fit into more boxes. So things for an employer become slightly more complicated. So if you hire me, you're hiring me for my branding, but you're hiring me for all these other things. So I add more value. So, and actually, in my early 30s, I co-founded an interim company because of ageism in marketing. So a long time ago, in the was it the late 80s, the early 90s? I mean, if you wanted to be a senior brand manager in marketing, you would be between the age of 28 and 32. And if you weren't, you wouldn't get that role. So, but then you were missed out on all this amazing talent, you know, that was older, and it didn't make any sense. So I co-founded a company called Interim Marketing and Management, and then we could put amazing people into organizations, whatever their age, whatever, you know, it didn't matter, because organizations didn't care what age they were. They just wanted to know that they could do the job. And that's all that mattered. And we did change age statistics in the marketing function, but we also changed other diversity measures as well. So I think organizations now are doing a lot about this, because 2 years' time, half the workforce, or almost half the workforce, is going to be over 50. So organizations need to start nurturing and loving their over 50s and keeping them. And the workforce is shrinking, and young people, the birth rate's dropped. There aren't as many young people. And do they have the employability skills? So organizations need to look at intergenerational teams and working with all ages. And I think for emerging and early talent and more experienced talent, they fall out of the job search process. I think if you fit into that box, it's fine. But I think when you're early talent, you don't. I think you need to have more of a conversation. The computer can't figure out whether you'll fit into the role or not. So.
Well, I've just posted up a comment from Christina, so I don't know if you can answer it now or whether it's something to come back to later.
I think, yes, they are. I do work with the Forward Institute, and we had a big event the other day, and there's a number of employers around the table, and they're actively looking at this, because if you have multi-generational teams, you have those different perspectives, and it helps you hire people. It helps, you know, consumers, if your customers are all different ages, or their aging population too. So so there are organizations looking at this, definitely. Some are better than others. And I think I do a lot of work in the talent drain. So parents in their 30s, you know, often fall out of corporate if life stage wise. And then in their 50s as well, females perhaps might fall out of organizations. So there's a huge piece there around multi-generational job share, or just bringing those guys, you know, bringing that talent together, basically, from different generations, and matching people who are upsizing their career with people who are downsizing their career. So, but I think roles need to be crafted really fast. We don't, you know, there's not going to be a perfect role for me on LinkedIn jobs. You know, there's a job at Unilever, head of age, longevity and employment models. Oh my goodness, I'd love that job. But, you know, that's kind of been invented around, good for Unilever, that's been invented around what's needed at the moment.
And you know, we're both doing job search, and I still have clients, and they're just applying for jobs they see advertised. And when I suggest that they make direct contact with companies, first of all, it's like, can you? And then it's like, but how do you? And And often their network is very small, and they're connected to less than 100 people on LinkedIn. So it's things that we need to do around this. But I think one of the things that I've always been trying to do, and I know you do as well, is around encouraging people to just you need to take a different approach to finding a job. Because if you go to one of these big job boards, I mean, what are you going to find? And then you've just got all the ATS software that's going to reject you before you're even considered. So approaching a company, I mean, imagine, I don't know how the job appeared with Unilever, but saying, that this is the job that I want to do. So I think that's great. And also this thing about, somebody of 60 or 70 working with somebody of, much younger, but working together. So you've got different views and different impacts and different insights. And then, and then gradually you can start working less hours maybe as you get older, because you want to take on some other things as well.
Yeah, and you can plan your future, can't you? So, and I think the other thing is, talk about my job boxes, but for me to get, my dream job would be the EDI manager of such and such a company. Well, I haven't done financial services, I don't fit into that job box. But say there was somebody in that role who was thinking about their work future and wanted more flex. I'm not going to mention the retirement word because it could be, there's all sorts of words to reframe that. But if you're looking for more flex, then maybe I could go alongside that person. I'm using me as an example, but because that role perhaps isn't so square shaped, it might be more human shaped, and then we could work together to map out what that might look like. So I think we need some real innovation and creativity in the kind of job world. And I think the other thing to say about the job boards or any job that's advertised, if you're advertising a job, or if you're applying for a job that's advertised, you've got competition. You've got competition from that organization internally. You've got competition externally. You've got competition everywhere. Whereas if you're thinking about what you're really great at, if you're thinking about brand you, what your competitive edge is, where you can make a huge, massive difference, like an interim manager would, and then thinking about the pitch to that organization, then there won't be any competition. It's just you.
Yeah. And my first book came out in 2008. And that was after I'd been on Tonight with Trevor McDonald, helping graduates get a job. If you remember the whole recession thing, and the director of my film and the editor and everything said, you ought to write a book. And that was when I wrote my first book, and I contacted big publishers, and they were saying, we'll bring it out in 2 years' time. And I learned to be a publisher, and I brought that first book out by setting up my own publishing company. Talk about stress. But I wrote about this in 2007, 2008. So this is a long, long time ago. And other people have obviously write about it as well. And I don't understand. Well, I do understand, because it's more difficult. And I put up that quote that somebody is saying, which is what we know about. So, and I think that's really useful. But people just get scared, and they think that I'll just take action. So if I apply for 20 jobs this week, I can tick a box on. But they haven't done a very good application. They've just sort of applied for anything without actually seeing how they measure up. And then they don't get anywhere. So then we're into this downward decline of the just getting sort of like depressed, really, about how things are going, and then how on earth do they keep the resilience high? And a lot of people just aren't happy with that. And as you said, when people, if you were feeling a bit low, thinking I'm never going to get a job, and then you come across that Indeed thing that says you're 55, you're in decline, or you're 54 and you think, well, next year I'll be in decline. It's like, well, what's the point? It's been really tough for people.
Absolutely. I think, yes. So I think job search as well, self-care is so important for that. It's so crucial for that. I think, and there are things out there, but you have to keep looking and looking and looking, and it is about conversations. It's about conversations with people conversations with people who know people who know people. It's not, as you said, it's not about applying online kind of for hundreds of jobs, because the percentages of landing a role that way are small and get to 50 plus, and they're even smaller. So
What interests me is, I can't remember if I ever asked you this question, is what got you involved or interested in sort of older people and aging? What was it that sparked it?
Well, I think it was that stint in headhunting in FMCG marketing when I was in my mid-20s, and I don't know, I was suddenly, I don't know, or maybe in my early 30s, but suddenly at 32 or 33, you're too old for this role that you really want. And that sounds peculiar. Then I did this startup, and that's ageism acting in a different way as well, because I think young people get a bad rap. And, a lot of the time in my early career, I was pretending to be older than I was, to get more gravitas and have that presence. But so I'm really interested in it. And what fascinates me as well is how, so when I was a 26-year-old headhunter, when I looked up the generations, they did feel quite old. I mean, that sounds terrible to say, but I think looking up the generations, you don't understand what it's like to be 35 or 45 or 55 or 65. Whereas I think looking down the generations, you absolutely understand. And I think that's why there should be more experienced people in the workforce, because you just don't have those stereotypes. Because and if I think about how I thought I was going to feel, at nearly 60, if we were sitting here and I was 40, I wouldn't think that I'd be doing this at 60. I think something totally different. So I think the lived experience of being those ages gives a different context. But I've always been interested in it, and we set up our company to literally combat ageism in marketing, which we did. So yeah. So I've been interested in it for a long time. What about you? How long have you been interested in it?
Right, but I posted that quote and I realised it's hiding me. But at least if I put it up, that means that when people watch this on playback, then they're doing it. Well, I was a welfare officer working for Royal Mail, and I got the job at 26, and it was the first time they'd ever employed a welfare officer below the age of 50, because they were usually sort of scoutmasters and the like. Well, I just got my degree in psychology, Open University, that the post office had paid for. And I ran my first pre-retirement seminar at 27, and I think I was 27, looked about 20. And they must have looked at me, and predominantly they were postal workers, and they must have looked at me and thought, who is this child talking about stuff that was relevant? But I was talking about, the non-financial side of retirement. But I got interested in it back then, and I've always been fascinated about pensions, and I've always been thinking about older people and having an interest in talking to older people and hearing their stories. And then when it came like in my 40s, I wanted to do a PhD, and it would all have been work related. And then in my early 50s, and then it would have been work related. And then it was suddenly getting the option to do a professional doctorate rather than a PhD. So it's much more work focused. And it was like, and even that I was going to do mid-careers. And, it's like, I know we talked about career MOTs. Well, we're not cars waiting, to check whether our big end's gone or something, whatever. But it was that. And it was like, and also I started doing my doctorate the October before lockdown. And come lockdown, all my work just ceased. So I could just work on it. And really, it was my full-time job. All I ever did was read about aging and meaningful aging, because that was my research focus. And now, as I'm getting older, it's not, I'm trying to move away from the, as Aviva talks about the third quarter, the 50 to 75, but I'm actually really interested in the 75 upwards, or maybe 80 upwards, when actually you really do want to make some changes because life is making some changes. So as I'm aging, I'm learning more and just identifying things that are going to be relevant as I move up. But also when I talk to my younger friends, they actually seem quite interested in, I guess it's enthusiasm with what I say, because they go like, well, we'll be old one day.
I think that's really important. I think age needs a good old rebrand, because it's really great as you get older, it kind of gets better, I think. And we don't want people at 40 thinking, oh my God, I can't, what dreadful thing getting old. Getting older is a privilege, and it's really great. So I think that's really important. And I think we need to tell those positive stories. There's lots of negative stories out there.
Yes. And when I did my research, one of the people that I reference is Becca Levy, who talks about aging and about the importance of the psychological factors. And if we've got a more optimistic view, then we're going to live for 7.5 years longer. And when I read that, and there's Rose Kenny, I think, who's written similar things as well. And you read that, and so much about aging is what's going on in our heads. So if if you think you're going to, once I hit 60 or whatever age, I'm going to be old and past it and nobody's going to want me. Well, your brain's just looking for all these reasons to support that. Whereas my view is, I'm just getting started. I've got, there's plenty I can be getting on with. And I don't have those negative views. And I think that's something that all of us are working with older people. We need to challenge the views that older people have. We also need to have challenged the views that younger people have. Absolutely. When they think that we're too old, and they use ageist comments, and they talk about, and children at school, going at grandparents with Zimmer frames. It's like,
I think the whole narrative needs changing, doesn't it? And in the workplace, a lot of isms you're not allowed to talk, when it comes to race or gender, lots of isms we don't talk about. But age, those narratives still seem to be there. So I think more work needs to be done on that. But I think it's definitely happening. And I think, again, it's that life stage thing. So it's kind of shattering. I talk about shattering stereotypes, don't I? So, I'm nearly 60 and I've got a daughter who's just done her GCSEs. And I was in a room at a big financial services company the other day with Brave Starts and with Pro Age. And there was a number of people who were same age as me who had, children going through GCSEs. So this whole what it looks like when you're 60 versus, what it could look like. And the difference in that life stage is huge. And I think that, that's something we need to bear in mind. We put people in boxes, don't we, age-wise? And it doesn't stack with the reality.
And this also takes me back to sort of super and everything, because it used to be, you go to school, you go to university, start your career, you climb the ladder, and then you retire. Whereas, especially if we're thinking about the 100-year life, at 50, people might want a complete change of career and go back to university, go back to study and start again. And, take some time out to look after children or grandchildren or elderly parents. We do what we want, but it's the flexibility that we need.
Absolutely. And I think those career trajectories are different as well. So if lots of people, literally, hashtag I've just got going again. Literally, that's how it feels. Son's driving, daughter's just done her GCSEs. I'm off again, whereas I have been downsizing, but kind of I guess my career's gone sideways, but I'm ready to go back up. Other people might be ready to change. They just might want to do something different as well. I think there's that, I don't know what the theory is called, Denise, but there's that whole 20 years, when you've been doing a role for 20 years, kind of the challenge falls out of that role. And when the challenge is gone, then so 20 years work career-wise is a time when lots of people change, because that job or that role that really interested them and gave them a challenge, they've done it for so long that it's just not challenging them anymore. So they want to go and do other things.
Well, 20 years is a really long time frame. I think what happens is, I started Royal Mail as a counter clerk and I left as assistant director. And back then, and I started in 1970 something, there was such a good organisation, and they paid for my education and they took me, all up the stages, and I kept getting promoted. But organisations are not like that anymore. Everybody I knew in Royal Mail, everybody left because the organisation changed, and clearly that's a very different organisation now. But people used to have their organisation that would look after them. They'd put you on training courses. And the psychological contract has now changed. Well, it's been changed 20 years. They don't look after you. It's down to you. And that's fine if you're highly proactive and you go looking for opportunities. But not everybody does. Not everybody's proactive. And they need a nudge, and they need an encourager, and they need a manager who probably mentors them and says, how are you getting on? What training do you need? Where are you seeing yourself heading? And if nobody says that, then you end up just sort of floating, something that word, and you're just waiting. And then people say, but you haven't got any, but when did you last develop yourself? And you can't really say, well, I was waiting for you to do it.
No, I think that's where the real change happens. So, so more experienced people you can go and do an apprenticeship at 50 plus, but then you're in a cohort, literally with young people, and you're got all this experience, and then you're working with somebody who's, needs to cut their teeth and has got no experience. So So I think there needs to be something around, I don't know, 150-day apprenticeship. In Gloucestershire, we ran this campaign called the 50/50 Challenge, and we got 50 employers to take on 50 people over the age of 50 for 50 days. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because then you can see what that person's like in situ. And so I think there needs to be some sort of, I don't know, program like that. And I think employers should be hiring, they should be skills-based hiring and strengths-based hiring. So they should be hiring on you. And then what happens is, instead of me investing, I don't know, £5,000 to do my coding course, then the cyber industry in Cheltenham, who, you know, is short of talent with transferable and, you know, those power skills, I call them. So they want people like me necessarily, but, you know, they've got a talent shortage and they want people. Then they hire people based on skills and strengths, and then they train them in those courses. They pay that money for the coding courses. And I think that's a better way of working, really, because then you can nurture people through that training and upskill them and reskill them into the roles that you need. And for me, the big issue for me is, everywhere I hear about these skills gaps and where, you know, we can't find people. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, because why aren't we matching all of these incredible people that there are, returners and 50+ talent? You know, why aren't we upskilling them or reskilling them to go and fill all the gaps that exist? It's you know, it needs to be done. Don't know how we're going to do it, but yeah, it needs to be done.
Yeah, exactly. Why aren't we? And, you know, since COVID, my work life has changed. But prior to that, it was often calls into organisations, you know, helping them to recruit people and working at the assessment centre what it is they were looking for. But too many would just we want somebody who's done this with company X, and then they'll come in. And I used to say, but you can teach skill. What you can't teach is their attitude. And
will, not skill. Yeah.
But it was a difficult sell to get them to think about that one. And this is what we need to do. Yeah.
Go on, sorry. I think that's why we're all interim managers now. We're all interim managers now. So we need to go and find, I've said since 1996, there's no such thing as a permanent job. We need, you know, we all need to be looking for our next new project, our next new assignment. And you do have to be proactive to do that. But organizations as well need to be more fluid about, I don't know, about how they work with people. Well, Unilever, new employment model. I think some things need to change. And I say, if you're doing a project for a short while, then all of that, what we used to do at interim is, you know, people would want people from the drinks industry, but then we would find the best person for the job and they didn't have any experience of the drinks industry. And because we had a partnership with our clients, then they would take them on and it would work out brilliantly. So I think, yes, we need to do some more thinking outside of the box and sort of more creative and innovative thinking.
I think
Christine is just saying the conversation needs to be taken in place with companies as well. Like, yes, I absolutely agree. Definitely should be.
And I think, you know, for those of us that are working with clients and career coaches, career consultants, whatever it might be, I mean, we're trying to change things for the individual, but they're still working in an they're still applying to get into an organisation that doesn't value those. There is one thing I just want to bring up, because often I hear people talk about, you know, there's all this huge talent of the over 50s and all these people, you know, they're all just waiting to get a job and they'll be marvellous. But there are some that won't be. And there are some that won't be. And I don't know, I think because I'm a chartered psychologist, often I get some quite challenging clients that come along. And sometimes they don't do themselves any favours. So their CV is dated. But what's even worse is they've never taken responsibility for their own development. And I always remember a chap who'd been a marketing director in a large company and got made redundant. And when I looked at his CV, it's like, so what actual training have you had in marketing? And he'd just sort of been given the job 10, 15 years before. And I said, so did you set out to like become a member of the Chartered Institute of Management? And no. So he had nothing. But because he'd been operating at marketing director level, he assumed he was going to be able to get another job. His CV didn't set him out as particularly exceptional. And also he was somebody who was probably about 50, maybe a bit younger than that, but he didn't seem to be in particularly good health. He didn't have energy. And I think, at all ages, but particularly when we're older, we need to demonstrate a bit of energy and enthusiasm. And if you're just like, I always remember he walked upstairs and he was like worn out by the time he got to the top of the stairs, and it wasn't even summer. So I do think that we can't say that every person over 50 will be an amazing employee. There'll be a few that need some work doing.
Absolutely. Just like you can't say that every young person would be a great employee. It's too broad a brushstroke, isn't it, really? But I think, yes, and I think, I don't know, I think but we have got, most of us though have got that, they call it crystallized wisdom, that model from Ray Cattell, and that's about, so fluid intelligence, which is just learning like a sponge, and all that learning we do, that does kind of tail off early 50s, but crystallized wisdom is like cumulative knowledge, and it just gets larger and larger and larger and larger. Yeah. That's why we're all interim managers now, because you just have all of that knowledge. So if you're running lots of things you've seen before, you can troubleshoot early and quickly. You can keep, some zen in the team, because these big issues or big crises, you've been there and done that before. So I think we do bring crystallized wisdom with us, kind of whoever we are. And I think that's why intergenerational teams are so important. And that crystallized wisdom, that's a massive piece of getting older and wising and being wiser. And I think that's, organizations need some more of that. So just that thinking, or that, I don't know, stopping and looking. And I think that's really important, and organizations could do some more of that.
I was, in fact, I do improv, and I was at my and it's really hard doing improv when you've got to think on the moment. And I was talking to them last week at the class. We're talking about a show that's going ahead, and I was saying, in fact, I used the terms crystallized and fluid intelligence, because I was saying, Joe, who's 18, about to go off to university, Joe is so fast and sharp at coming up with things, and I says, but it's harder for me. It's harder because, my brain takes a while to bring things in. But what I've learned is, actually in improv, I don't have to reply immediately. You can actually pause and do what they call space work, where you're just sort of doing some actions.
Yeah.
That just gives my brain time to go into crystallized intelligence and find some trigger that's something I know why I'm there. But I think that's what worries.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I talk about it as a library. So if you think of a library of books, so when you're 25, you've got books halfway around the first wall. When you're 55, you've got books around 3.5 walls, and those books are all there. That's extraordinary. But it does take you a while. Sometimes it might take you a while to find one. So yeah,
it does indeed. But that's, how often do you need to know the answer immediately? You don't, unless it's some amazing crisis thing. I think
we've got Ask Google as well, haven't we? Things have changed. It's not like working in the 80s when you did have to go. You used to have to go to the business library when I did my degree. That's where we went if we wanted to do primary research on our new product launch, or it's all at our fingertips. I don't think we need to have all that info in our head.
No, we don't. And actually, that's a good segue into the whole of the use of AI. Because there's ChatGPT, there's all the alternatives to that as well. And I think that's where, being older, it's like, actually, we can use it as a resource. And whenever I use AI, I just think of it as like my graduate assistant, who is really keen and eager.
Yes.
But needs to be properly managed.
That's a great way of looking at it. Yeah.
If I had to summarize an article, or just to save me a time, it still needs a bit of quite a bit of editing. But it's you've just got to start, and I think that's something that we shouldn't be afraid of.
No, I agree.
Using technology,
and I think that's Yeah, I think that we'll look at that visual, actually, which we haven't posted up, have we? But never mind. I'm sure everybody's seen it enough. It was everywhere. It was everywhere, wasn't it, on LinkedIn? Well, now and last week. But yeah, and AI. If you go into ChatGPT, Victoria Tomlin said this. If you go into ChatGPT and you look up career stages, that model comes up. Yeah. So it just goes to show it's not finding the latest, up to datest ages, life stages and events info. ChatGPT is finding not some random stuff. It's absolutely right. It was a career stage model, But if, you know, that's why you need some wisdom, or somebody to look at that with some knowledge and some experience and expertise.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I like the way we do this. We need to do more of these, because it's just us chatting with, you know, people listening. The only thing doing it this way is I've been able to post comments. So if anybody's got any questions, please post them. But it seems to be, I think I can only actually see comments from LinkedIn along here. So apologies if you've asked something and we've not seen it, but I will look on other platforms later just to see, because I do like technology and I do like learning new things and seeing what can be. And I think if we start thinking about, you know, how can we best help and support people that are older, I think there's stuff that we can do, but there's also, as people have mentioned, as we know, there's the conversations that we can have with employers. And so if anybody's got any suggestions about, you know, how we do get this message into wider society, wider organizations. I mean, it's not just us two doing it. I think we're all a group, you know, we're all together looking about what is it that we can do. But I think when I'm working one-to-one with people, it's around the voice in their head that says that they're too old, because you're not too old and it's not too late. It's only too late when you're dead. And,
I think, you know, there's 55 Redefined are doing really great work, aren't they? Their jobs, you know, their job board really helps people. They've got a lot of narrative. They've got their life board as well. There's Restless. So there's organizations that are really helping, and there's some real progress that's being made here. And I think those, you know, the way that we talk about people really is changing. And I think, I think organizations are recognizing that they need people, but it's the process that they've got inside the organization that breaks. So if your hiring manager is, you know, I don't know, is younger, or if they're bringing people in and they think it's like their grandma, you know, that's where the process stops. And I think organizations as well need to look at I call it the hashtag PX, potential employee experience. So I'm a marketer, that's my background. And if you're a candidate applying for a job, you should have a wonderful experience wanting a new credit card for a bank. You know, that whole process should be nurturing and loving and looking after your candidates. And I saw something earlier today, maybe employers are going to start paying candidates to come to interview. And I think that could be a real game changer, because it might make them, I don't know, focus more on who they bring in. And it just might, I don't know, what do you think about that? Do you think that might help things?
First of all, they used to always pay you expenses when you went for an interview. So when did that stop? I just want to, if you don't mind me just responding to Sahida's comment.
Yeah.
Because I can relate this to something I read, and I can't remember. It was certainly academic referenced around this, and this is about young men. It was a study done with young men at the gym, and you know, obviously at a gym there's people of all sorts of ages, but often, you know, the gym bunnies, you know, a certain type of man, not stereotype, but who looks at somebody older who's probably not leg pressing really high weights or something, and just thinks all negative things about them. If you've got the voice in your head that thinks, goodness, once I turn 40, what's somebody of 40 doing at the gym? You know, surely they should be, you know, going off and playing golf or something. But what happens with that person when they turn 40? Because the voice in their head is saying, you can be too old. And then they don't want to do something anymore. And every time I swim, I go in the sauna, and I'm always having conversations with people. But one of the things I talk to them about is around, you know, what's the voices in their heads, just to get some views. And it would be a great chat-up line, you know, if I was but it's just a really interesting conversation to have about what are the voices in your head that you, when you think about yourself, you know, working out in 10 years time. And it's quite broad, the sorts of ways that people respond.
Yeah, there's some great videos online, isn't there? When I don't know, younger people in organizations are asked to describe older people, or, you know, or give their comments. You see photos of people and give their comments on them. And then actually when they meet and spend time with them, that busts all the myths. And I think I think that should happen more often. I think there was some research, I can't remember the numbers, but that young people in some organizations hadn't spoken to anybody who was over 50 in their organization. And I think organizations should get their employee resource groups to talk to each other or hang out together or make some interactive, I don't know, workshops or improv or something, conferences to kind of really mix those generations. I think that would be really useful.
But I think the more we write and the more we spread the word, and the more everybody's listening in also spreads the word. These are just little pebbles. These are just little pebbles, and I think we need to have these little pebbles and make some changes, because all the young people now who might worry about aging, they're gonna age themselves, and so we can spearhead things for younger people, because they're going to be working. I mean, when are they going to get their pension? They're not going to be getting final salary pension, are they?
Yeah. They're going to have, they're going to have hashtag 60-year careers, aren't they? They are going to be, and the whole education work work retirement model is broken. They'll be in and out of employment, kind of, they'll be on that sort of career cycle for a long time, a lot longer than us, and they'll be doing lots of different things. So they'll need to reinvent themselves.
And that can be challenging for people, because I think sometimes people just think, like, really, can't I just be a plodder? I'm not, but can I just do my job and just do a job and then go home? Not everybody wants to be, manage their own interim manager.
And absolutely right. And I think as well, and that's another thing about being, 50 plus, maybe we don't all want to go up the ladder, maybe we want to go sideways, maybe we want to go downwards. It really depends on what we want. So organizations might assume, oh, you're ever so expensive, but it's actually, I'm not that expensive because I don't want to work as much, or because I want to do something totally different. I don't want that huge role that I used to have. I want to do something different. So
and what we used to talk about, in occupational psychology, was about career enrichment and career enlargement. And, the conversations that managers should be having with their staff of all ages is like, are you trying to get promoted? Do you want to get promoted?
Absolutely.
Or do you want to just have a broader role with more interesting things? And again, as you say, sometimes you don't want to be working a 40-hour week, and neither do you want to cram all those hours into 4 10-hour days. Sometimes people just want to do 25 or 30 hours to give themselves more time to do painting, art, or just
biking.
Whatever. You're a mountain biking afternoon. Yeah, but we don't always just want to be in a sort of conventional hourly sort of job.
Yeah, and I think those conversations are key as well for retaining people, definitely, because it talk about a midlife collision, for at 50, that kind of everything comes together and you walk. But actually, if you had a conversation with your employer, then you might, I don't know, you might just have an extra hour for lunch, and that gives you time to go for a run and decompress afterwards, or not rush back. So conversations, I think, and about what the future might look like. So in a few years' time, when this happens, I'd like to reduce my hours, or actually in a few years' time, I'd like to increase my hours. So I think it's all about conversations. And I think what we need to do, Denise, is make sure that the people outside who aren't on that job carousel, because I think if you're on the job carousel working for an employer at the moment, you can have those conversations, and even if they're not being had, you could go to HR and you could try and start those conversations. But I think sometimes it's if you're off that job carousel, it's like, how do you get back on it, or how do you have those conversations? And I think I think those people as well, we need to, make sure that they're motivated and understand the aging demographics of the population, because actually, a lot of the workforce is going to be over 50. Being over 50 is an asset. It's not a drawback. And so it's a good time, really good time.
Right. Now, often people talk about the over 50s, but you don't take babies and graduates and talk about this 20-year thing, do you? And it's like, how much in common does a 50-year-old and a 70-year-old have when we think about it? So I think when we start thinking about, the workplace. And there's many people in their 50s, early 60s maybe, who are still wanting to have a really good career and put lots of emphasis into the job and the career. And things changed with me. I think it was COVID and the doctorate and buying a wood meant that actually work is still something I want to do, but I don't want it to be like the be all and end all of things. And I think there's a lot of people, you reach an age, and obviously that's the stage where you start thinking about retirement will vary. And I know that Janet and some other people have said, we should call it refinement. And I know that term. And in my book, I talk about retirement, as in tires, tires, as in changing your tires. But the reason I kept the word retirement, and the publisher wants to keep the word retirement, is because people talk about retirement and they talk about retirement pension, and everybody out there talks about retirement. I just wanted to change the definition. So retirement isn't decline, but retirement is time to let's refocus and let's do something different. And I think that's one of the real concerns that older people have is, but who am I without my job? So I was actually chatting to my postman first thing this morning, and he was saying he can't wait to retire because then he's going to do lots of relaxing and playing golf and things. And I'm thinking, and I said, yeah, but I know you'll do that for a year or so, but then what? I said, and I'm trying to get him to think about his future in 10 years' time. But I think we need to start thinking about what's going to give us meaning and purpose when it's not the job. Because if we don't start thinking about that, you're just going to carry on with the job, which is fine until you reach 80 and you think, the stuff I could have done.
Yeah.
And I missed out. And now I've got some health issues and now I can never do that. So I've owned my wood now for 3 years. And, probably when I get to about 80, I'll sell my wood. But for now, it's a huge part of who I am. And if I was so focused on career and consultancy, I wouldn't have time to be a woodland owner. Whereas, getting down there and woodland management and, it's allowed me to find meaning and purpose in a very different way to my career. And I've just noticed the time.
I know. We need to think. So I think retirement, retirement's not all it's cracked up to be. That's what I'd say. And also there's been an 18-month window. So in the pandemic, all those people retired, all those over 50, a lot of over 50s were made redundant. I think 30% people were made redundant were over 50, but a lot of people retired, and 18 months was the window. That's what the research says. Built a new extension, been around the world, and then they're like, oh, now what? And I think that now what, whether you're working or whether you're not working, it's really important to kind of know what that is. But Denise, we're nearly out of time now, so I think we need to wrap it up. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for your comments and for sharing. And yes,
yeah, I've just noticed there's some more. So, but I think they will all appear. But thank you, Ilana, for your comment, and thank you, Zahida, for another one there. And so it's always a joy meeting up with you, and we don't often meet up on like this, so this is great. But we'd like to have another conversation, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we will. Yes, we will. Don't know what the subject will be. Could be identity. Actually, identity might be a good subject. That whole if your work is your identity, or when you leave work, how your identity changes. That might be a good one. But anyway, if anybody's got any suggestions on what they want to hear next, please let us know.
Yeah, so there's lots of thank you messages. I'm not going to put them all up because I'm just going to spend all my time clicking. But lovely to see you again, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And I've enjoyed playing with the tech a bit.
Okay, great to see you, everybody.
Take care, everybody. And it's going to be loaded up very soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, will be. Okay.